topic for today is long-distance relationships. I know it's a bit of a funny subject, but I did love poetry the first year, then I did love poetry the second year, so I keep looking for new subjects. Eventually I'll do divorce, probably. Okay. I'm going to give you a little bit of a very potted sociological history of marriage and how people find mates, and then we'll talk about some Arabic poetry. So the thing that I'm an academic specialist in is classical Arabic poetry. I really am not qualified to talk about sociological and anthropological issues, but I will anyway. Anyway, in traditional or pre-industrial societies, people usually don't roam very far to find a mate. And in studies of marriage, this feature is called propinquity. Propinquity just means proximity. So when people are trying to understand how people find their mates, this is one of the most important factors. And I have a song about that, sorry. I'm sure you all know it. It's by Muhammad Abdul Talib. Alright, now that's a funny song, but it's actually quite interesting because what the lyrics are by Valentine, what the person singing the song is complaining about is the fact that he lives in Zaynab, but the person he loves lives in Hussein, the neighborhood around Hussein, which is actually not that far in a car or a taxi or a bus, but walking between Sayyida and Hussein, is pretty much walking from the western perimeter of the old city into the heart of the old city. So it gives you an idea of how even this small distance is worthy of complaint. So, historically speaking, the marriage radius in rural areas, now we're talking about China, was about 5 kilometers during the 20 years from the 1920s to 1940s. In China, marriage was within, and I can't pronounce Chinese, so I won't try, 5 kilometers and 8 townships, which exactly matches the distance between the villages and the local primary market of the area. So, if you get an idea of how big, 5 kilometers is really nothing, right? It's about a quarter of the distance between here and the old campus at Tahrir, or a fifth of the distance. In Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, given the preference for village endogamy, and endogamy is a term I will be defining later, marriages outside the village tend to be within a 5-mile radius. Among the Tibeto-Burman communities of Nepal, distances are small enough to be covered in an hour or 2 by foot, which is actually what it would take to walk from Sayyida to Hussein. Walking from Sayyida to Hussein will take less than an hour, or an hour if you're not terribly fit, or if you're contending with Cairo traffic. Another study says proximity has an effect on our choice of partner because we tend to live near potential mates. The people with whom we are perpetually in contact are the people who share our spheres of activity: work, school, church, stores, gyms, restaurants, etc. It's this close contact with those who live near us that enables romantic interest to develop. Various studies have determined that propinquity does in fact play an important role in our mate choices. Brossard used the addresses found on 5,000 consecutive Philadelphia marriage licenses to determine that 1/6 of the couples, so that's 18%, 1/6 of the couples lived within a block of one another. 1/3 lived within 5 blocks, and 51% lived within 20 blocks of each other. Similarly, a study in New Haven, Connecticut found that 51% of the applicants for marriage licenses lived within a 20-block radius. So this is saying that 1 out of every 2 couples lived within 20 blocks of each other when they got married. Other research in Columbus, Ohio found that over 50% of married couples lived within 1 mile of each other at the time of their first date. At least 13 subsequent studies have supported the original findings. And that's from an article by Kristen Livraj. This is the titles of several articles, including Brossard's article, which have confirmed these findings of how 20 blocks, 5 miles is essentially the radius where a majority of people find their future spouse. Now we're talking about the bicycle. The modern bicycle was invented in the 1870s. There were earlier forms of the bicycle in the 19th century, but the modern bicycle was invented in the 1870s, and for the first time allowed women to stray far from the home. This is a quote from a famous suffragette. Let me tell you what I think of bicycling. I think it's done more to emancipate women than anything else in the world. It gives women a feeling of freedom and self-reliance. I stand and rejoice every time I see a woman ride by on a wheel. The picture of free, untrammeled womanhood. That's by Susan B. Anthony, who's an extremely famous American suffragette on the back of the American dollar coin. Oh, sorry, not the new dollar coin, the silver dollar coin. Steve Jones, who was, until he retired, professor of genetics at University College London, said, "Without a doubt, the most important event in human evolution was the invention of the bicycle." And here Steve Jones is referring to the cheap and easy way of expanding the marriage pool, right? If you get on a bike, 5 miles is no distance at all, right? You can ride easily 20 miles to get somewhere. So it suddenly expands the amount of people you have to choose from. In the 21st century, which is the century in which you live, the declining costs of air travel and telecommunications provide the circumstances for long-distance relationships. So the reason why so many people talk about long-distance relationships, the reason why so many people are in them, and the reason why so many people suffer from them, is because it's very cheap to get around the globe, and it's very cheap to maintain communication around the globe. So this is a 1967 song, written by John Denver. But actually, there's a historical basis to this. In the 1960s, for the first time in the United States, air travel was being democratized. Suddenly, the monopolies on airlines were broken. The price of airfare dropped precipitously, and people could afford to fly. When people can afford to fly, that means that they're traveling, they're breaking social connections in the places in which they live, and they're also forming new connections across a continent. So it does actually give you a technological basis for this problem, or if you want to call it problem, or this new phenomenon of long-distance relationships. This is another quotation. Transport and communication costs have considerably declined during the 20th century, notably with technological improvements and through the application of economies of scale. Air transportation boomed after the Second World War with the application of significant technological improvements such as the jet engine and the design of better aircrafts. Telecommunications are, however, the sector where costs have decreased the most. And pay attention to this statistic. In 2000, an international phone call was about 1% of its 1940 cost. Right? So the cost of a phone call in 2000 was 1 cent. If a phone call in 1940 cost $1, in 2000 it cost 1 cent. And obviously you cannot spend hours on the phone with the person who lives in another continent unless the price of telecommunications is cheap. Most people in long-distance relationships use Skype, and the cost of a per-minute Skype call is nothing. It's, computer to computer. For instance, while a 3-minute phone call between New York and London was $293 in 1931, the same call cost $1 in 2001, and in 2005 cost 25 cents. This is all from Jean-Paul Retreat's The Geography of Transport Systems, which is a fascinating textbook. And on this graph, you can see the declining cost of airfare, telephone calls, computers, and sea freight. That's from the United Nations Human Development Report. Now, there was a couple of other factors in addition to residential propinquity. So in addition to the fact that people tend to marry those with whom they live nearby to, they also marry people in the same occupation. This is something called occupational propinquity. And, since many of you are students, you should note that there is a tendency toward educational homogamy. Homogamy being the tendency for spouses to be similar and share similar characteristics. So that is, homogamy is the opposite of opposites attract. People tend to marry people like them, not people unlike them. And then now long-distance relationships have become a popular cultural phenomenon. This is a film that did well at Sundance called Like Crazy. And I think the reviews are quite funny. I mean, one says, Like Crazy manages to capture the elusive whimsy of first love, only to beat it to death with a tedious on-again, off-again love story and two main characters obstinately selfish and mundane. The other says it's more like a series of greeting cards suitable at different stages of relationship, from sparkling first love to broken relationship to marriage and out of it. The screenplay is rather formless and for the most part tedious. Now, why am I selecting these negative reviews? Because to many people, being in a long-distance relationship preoccupies them, it causes them lots of stress and grief, but to people outside looking in, it does seem quite tedious and selfish. Because obviously by entering into a long-distance relationship, you create the circumstances which will cause you distress in the future. No one. Gillian Stevens found in a study that the correlation between educational characteristics of brides and grooms remained the same whether or not they had the opportunity to meet as fellow students at a particular institution. So that means that not only do people marry people at the same university, they marry people at the same educational level even when they're not from the same university. A study by Facebook, Facebook has lots of data from people's profiles. When you say, so-and-so graduated from such and such a school and is married to so-and-so, Facebook can use that to create sociological data. So Facebook did a study called From Classmates to Soulmates in 2013 and found 15% of individuals attended the same high school as their spouse. And I'm not giving you the map, but the map that Facebook shows is that where people live in big cities, this tends not to be true. This is usually true of rural communities and suburban communities. So when there are fewer people around, people tend to marry the people they went to school with. And 28% of married college graduates attended the same college, which is a pretty frightening characteristic. I mean, a pretty frightening statistic for those of you who are in college. It means that 28% of you will marry someone from AUC. I mean, obviously this statistic comes from the United States, but still, you can appreciate it. It might actually be worse at AUC, I don't know. All right. And the first study on this subject was Donald Marvin in 1918. So people have been working on this subject for a long time. There are other types of homogamy, by which I mean marrying people like you. Socio-professional. So, professors tend to marry professors, doctors tend to marry doctors, lawyers tend to marry doctors. Ethnic homogamy, which is also called endogamy. Endogamy meaning marrying within your social group, right? Endogamy inside the social group. Exogamy means marrying outside the social group. Religious homogamy. This causes riots in Egypt sometimes when people try and violate this principle. So we have people who marry people of the same religion. And in Egypt, you also have marriage between cousins. It's quite a common phenomenon. There's another form of endogamy, marrying within the family. So long-distance relationships belong to the 21st century for technological and social reasons outlined above. So there's a magazine online called the LDR Magazine. There's loads of articles. There's a Reddit. There's a subreddit dedicated to long-distance relationship. There's another website called Loving from a Distance. And there are so many articles. Oh, sorry, these are YouTube videos of people who are in long-distance relationships who film themselves when they get together, right? And then there's articles. So this one is very funny. If you look at the bottom image, it's the Center for the Study of Long-Distance Relationships. 4 Secrets to Long-Distance Success, a theory why long-distance relationships don't work, 5 things I wish I knew, 5 things I learned about, how to sustain long-distance relationships, 5 tips I learned from my World War II grandpa. And there's also 11 best apps for long-distance relationships. So how many of you are in long-distance relationships? Do you use some kind of apps, right? WhatsApp, FaceTime, you right? I mean, this is the bread and butter of long-distance relationships. So this guy says, I was forced into a long-distance relationship and it was terrible. So I made an app to make it less terrible. And he made this app called Without. And you can download it for free. It's called a relationship app for couples that like each other. Right. So I'm trying to stress the fact that technological and social factors really influence the way people find their mates. If you hadn't already noticed, I was trying to stress. Okay. And then there are a couple of new studies beyond the local marriage market, influence of modernization and globalization, and geographical heterogamy, and searching for a mate, the rise of the internet as a social intermediary. One other reason why people find themselves in long-distance relationships is because they find each other on the internet, which presupposes distance, right? The internet, even if you're using the internet within the same city, it means that you're not seeing each other in person. It means you're finding each other on the internet, so you're more likely to be in a long-distance relationship. And it's very funny, on this Reddit page, there's a long distance, so the community of people who are in long-distance relationships, and there's a sub-community of people who call themselves never meets, or never met, or something like that. Which means people who have started relationships via the internet without ever having met. So it's a further subdivision of the phenomenon. And 25% of university students in the United States maintain long-distance relationships, as I'm sure many of you do. At the same time, however, distance, separation, and longing are woven throughout the canon of classical Arabic poetry. That brings me to clap. That's the nicest section from Kulthum's 1965, Ba'id Anna. Now, so Kulthum is a good introduction for those of you who don't know anything about classical Arabic poetry, because much of what she sings about is there in classical Arabic poetry. And now, because it's my bread and butter, I'm going to give you some examples of this long distance kind of thing and separation in classical Arabic poetry. So Al-Lahdi writes, لم أنس يوم الرحيل موقفها وترفح في دموعه غرق وقولها والركاب سائرة تتركنا هكذا وتنطلق. I don't think you need a translation if you know Arabic because it's so clear. I'll never forget her standing there on the day I went away, the corner of her eye drowning in tears, and how she said to me as the mounts pulled away, "That's it, you're going and leaving." This scene is repeated over and over and over again in classical Arabic poetry. It is the time at which tribes, having joined together in the off-season, right, so in spring and fall, their tribes come together in safe areas, they protect one another, they share resources, but when the land ceases to be fat, so when the land, they don't have enough greenery, etc., they need to separate, because a large group of people, the land does not support a large confederation of tribes, they're going to separate. And what happens is, the relationships, kind of like summer flames, that form between men and women, or men and men from opposite tribes, have to end on the day that the tribes separate. In Arabic, it's often referred to as Yom al-Bain. Bain here meaning separation. And many poems start with it. The most famous is what being Banat Su'ad. Banat Su'ad is the most famous poem. Also, Ibn Dumayna. وقد زعموا أن المحب إذ دنا يمل وأن النائي يشفي من الوجد بكل تداوينا فلم يشفى ما بنا على أن قرب الدار خير من البعد. So Ibn Dumayna writes, they claim that a lover brought nearer his beloved grows bored, and that distance is the cure for passion. I tried both solutions and neither one worked. Being nearer to home is still better than not. And so this poem closes what we can call hikmah, right? So this is the last line is قُرْبَ الدَّارِ خَيْرٌ مِنَ الْبُعْدِ. Another poem by Ibn Dumayna is a little bit longer. خليلي هل من حيلة تعلمانها تسكن وجدا أو تكفكف مدمعة
فقال نعم نشر الفيافي وتيها إذا اجتذب الحبل الغرام تقطع إذا القلب لا يطمع سلع عن حبيبه ولو كان من ماء صبابة مترعا فجربت ما قال فلم ألق راحة فأيقنت أن القرب ما زال أنفعا وقد زعم أن النوى يذهب الهوى وما صدق في القول حين تنوع وليس شفاء القلب إلا حبيبه فإن لم يصل كان تجاور أودع. Okay, I like this poem, one because it rhymes with ain, which is not terribly common in Arabic. It's not uncommon, it's not very common, and because it's all about this. So he asks his friends for advice. He says, friends, do you know of any trick that might calm my heart or staunch my tears? Yes, they said. Traveling across the desert plains, it pulls on the bounds of loves and rips it free. For the heart will never seek to forget the one it loves, even if it's full to the brim with passion, mutra'a. So I did what they said, but it made no difference, and I knew that being near was still better. They claimed that being far away from the one you love extinguishes your passion, but they were wrong when they branched out. The only cure for the heart is the one it loves, and even if he doesn't come, then it's less trying to remain nearby. There's a story that is narrated by Hisham ibn Kalbi. Hisham ibn Kalbi is the foremost historian of pre-Islamic Arabs. He says, إنه رأى امرأة في الموقف من عرفات. So this is a woman during the pilgrimage on Arafat, and this is what she says. أمل فتاة فرق الهجر بينها وبين الذي تهواه يا ربي من وصلي حججت ولم أحجج لسوء عملته ولكن لتعديني على قاطع الحبل أصبت بعقلي في هواه صغيرة وقد كبرت سني فرد به عقلي وإلا فساوي الحب بيني وبينه فإنك يا مولاي توصف بالعدل. O Lord, the woman says, is there any hope of union for a young woman who is separated from the man she loves? I've come on pilgrimage, not to atone for any sins, but to ask you to help me against the one who cut ties. I went crazy for him as a young girl, and now that I'm older, I'm asking you to give me back my wits and him. And if you won't do that, then at least make us love each other equally, for you, my Lord, are the one they call just. And another funny one from Khalid. This one is not specifically about relationships. It could also be used when you miss your family, homesickness, or whatever. It says, جسمي معي غير أن الروح عندكم فالجسم في غربة والروح في وطني فليعجب الناس مني أن لي بدنا لا روح فيه ولا روح بلا بدن. So, my body's here with me, but my soul's there with you. My body's in a strange land, but my soul stays at home. Let the people gawk at me. I have a soul with no body, a body without a soul. And it's obviously important to notice that, the word watan is used in Arabic, from the very earliest period, but we're not talking about a nation here, we're talking about a homeland, right? And then obviously you have Majnun Layla. Majnun Layla is the king of this kind of poetry. He has a nice poem where he says, خبرت ماني, sorry, that's miswritten. خبرت ماني أن تيماء منزل لليل إذن الصيف وألقى المراسي فهذه شهور الصيف عنا قد انقضت فما للنوى ترمي بالليل المرامية وإني لأخشى أن أموت فجاءة وفي النفس حاجات إليك كما هي وإني لينسيني لقاؤك كلما لقيتك يوما أبثك مابيا وقالوا به داء عياء أصابه وقد علمت نفسي مكان دوائي. Taymah, you told me, is where you'll find Layla, when summer has slung its anchors ashore. But summer has come and gone, and still separation permits no chance of meeting. I fear I shall die suddenly, my soul still needing you. For every time we meet, your presence drives all thoughts from my mind. He's suffering from an illness, they say, but my heart knows its way to the cure. And then another one by a poet called Ibn Matruh, who was active at the very end of the Ayyubid period in Egypt. He dies in 1235. He says to his beloved, مَغَيَّرَ الْبُعْدُ وَجْدِ فِيكَ يَا قَمَرُ. So notice that Egyptians 800 years ago were calling each other Qamar. 800 years ago. Anyway. مَغَيَّرَ الْبُعْدُ وَجْدِ فِيكَ يَا قَمَرُ وَلَنْ ثَنَ عَنْكَ لَقَلْبٌ وَلَا نَظَرِ يُدْنِيكَ قَلْبِي إِذَا مَا الدَّارُ نَازِحَةٌ سَوَانِحُ الطَّرْفِ وَتَذْكَارُ وَالْفِكْرِ. Distance hasn't affected my passion for you, darling moon, nor have my heart or eyes turned from you once. If I'm far from home, your specter, memories and thoughts of you bring you near to my heart. خلفت شخصك عندي لا يفارقني بل حاضر يسمع الشكوى ويعتذر. متى ضمعت إلى لقياك أوردني منك الهوى عذب ورد ما له صدر. You left your image here with me and it stays by my side. So this is the memory, this idea that you can see the beloved when they're not really there. طيف الخيال is called in Arabic. It hears my complaints and makes amends. Whenever I thirst to be reunited with you, it gives me the sweet water of love to drink endlessly. يا ساحر الطرف إن الليل من طرفي بطيب ذكرك الليل كله سحر. O charming specter, sweet memories of you make my every night a dawn. All right. Now I've got you a couple of other examples outside of the Arabic tradition. So the first one is from the Persian tradition, but it's modern. It's a pop song by Gugush, 1970s. You might not be able to finish the poem, but the idea is it's this image of a wall, and the two lovers are like windows stuck into a wall and unable to move, even though they're beside each other. Right? And the wall, symbol of society clearly or whatever. Okay, so that's the first one is from Iran, 1970, I said. Yeah. The second example is now from, I have to remind myself. Oh yes, the second example is also, it's not Persian, I mean it's half in Persian and half in an English language. It's a poem by Nasir Khosrow, sung by the Qawwali singer Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, Zahala Miskeen. And I'll give you the translation as well. It's not my translation. Is one of my favorite ones actually. It's a Azeri folk song, so it's an Azeri Turkish, and this is a very old version of it, sung by Rashid Bebulov. Clip number 6. He's got a very funny voice, but it's a nice song. Yeah, and it carries on. The samovar is lit, the teacups are sugared, the beloved has come and gone, I'm alone once more. How sweet is my beloved. And those are all the examples I have. I will put the slides on my website or the department website if you want to spend more time going over them. Otherwise, I wish you a very happy Valentine's Day, with or without your beloved.